thank you for viewing our panel discussion of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth. Why this play? Why now? Wilder once said that skin mostly comes alive under a condition of crisis. It was very popular during World War II, for example, then again in the mid-1970s amidst Vietnam, Watergate, and economic recession, and again after 9/11, and now again for us, facing COVID and our own difficult times. So before or after you see Seton Hill's production of this Pulitzer Prize-winning play, we want to share some insights from this timeless and very timely play. But first, I'd like to let our panelists introduce themselves and maybe say a few words about why they chose to participate in this panel and their initial reactions to the script.
Hi, I'm David von Schlichten, and I'm Associate Professor of Religious Studies here at Seton Hill. I'm also the coordinator of our Gender and Women's Studies program. And I was really intrigued by the play and wanting to be on the panel because A, I have a soft spot for theater, and B, I was really intrigued by the treatment of religion in the play. That's pretty evident, and was just sort of fascinated by how the play explores sort of the madness and absurdity, but also hope that's embedded in people dealing with crisis.
Hi, I'm Jessica Brisky. I am an associate professor in biology, and I am a co-coordinator for the environmental studies minor. I've always had a big passion for the environment and nature, and so I see my role here at Seton Hill to really be an advocate for that, and to bring climate change to the forefront for students, to make them realize that it's here and what's the evidence behind it and what can they do. So I was really excited to see that climate change in particular is an issue that was addressed in this play. And then in general, I really love plays, and it's so out of my comfort zone to be here on stage. So I thought this would be really fun and exciting, and so I'm glad I'm here.
Hi, I'm Ariel Frakor. I'm the director of Skin of Our Teeth. I did not choose this play. I was brought on. The play was already chosen, but honestly, this is a play that's completely up my alley. I would have chosen this play. I love plays with big concept ideas, and what I really like about this play is that you can, as an audience member, choose to focus on those big concepts. You can sit back and go, oh yeah, that's so interesting. Or you can sit back and be entertained, because even though we've got all of this metaphor going on, there's also this story of this all-American family getting into a bunch of trouble. So really this play has the best of both worlds. I'm happy to be here to discuss it even more.
Hi, I'm Diana Hoover. I'm an associate professor of chemistry in the department chair. So I teach chemistry, I teach forensic science, and I'm always trying to pull in kind of societal issues while we do that. So when I was first approached about this panel, I quite honestly thought I'd be talking about chemistry and oceans and carbon dioxide. And then I got a play script, which was kind of an interesting turn of events. And I can't say that I was disappointed, because this is what the liberal arts is all about. As a former and reformed band and theater kid, I kind of get this. So I'm happy to be here.
And I'm Carolyn Jers, a sophomore musical theater and dance major and student dramaturg for the production of Skin of Our Teeth. I'm also an actor in the play, puppeting the woolly mammoth and understudying the roles of Sabina and Homer. As a performer, I've been able to experience bringing the play from the page to the stage, and in my capacity as dramaturg, I've been impressed and at times overwhelmed with the depth of the script, which draws on literature, philosophy, religion, foreign languages, and science. But this complexity has allowed the play to speak to each of our panelists from their different disciplines in diverse ways. In speaking with our artistic director, Denise Pullen, I learned that the play selection committee chose The Skin of Our Teeth to open this season for very specific reasons. First of all, it offers hope for the family unit and the family of all mankind if we learn the lessons of the play, try to heal our divisions, and consider how our actions impact each other and our future upon planet Earth. The play addresses climate change from a unique perspective over different time periods. but the fact that we humans still have little control over natural disasters keeps asserting itself throughout the play. Last winter, people in Texas were breaking up and burning their furniture when an unexpected and long, frigid period exceeded the limits of power capacities, very like Act 1 of the play. Dr. Brisky, when you read the script, which covers over 5,000 years of history, what were your thoughts on how it mirrors or contrasts with what is happening in the global climate?
So you're right in that humans have low control over natural disasters, but it's important to recognize that our current climate situation and the disasters that come from it are the direct result of our human actions, which was not directly displayed in the play. However, I do think the script mirrors the state of our current global crisis and especially our attitudes towards it. With the play's impending ice age, attitudes from denying there is anything happening, to feeling hopeless about the situation, to general apathy towards the creatures, but as well as our fellow humans. Despite the extreme environmental conditions outside, we tend to relax in our house and have our coffee because, as they say in the play, if it gets worse, what shall I do? Secondly, I think it's particularly poignant that they ask the animals if they have ever experienced climate like this. Have their grandparents ever experienced climate like this? Of which they say no. Right now, we're hoping they will tell us that, we're hoping that they'll tell us that this is normal and we can survive. Yet, when it's apparent that they won't all survive, they kick the animals out into the cold, sentencing them to freeze to death. So, currently, where we are at now, everywhere, our plant and animal species are telling us that our climate is not normal. But instead of heeding that warning, we ignore it and we sentence them to extinction. That's the me before you attitude. And it's further exemplified by the treatment of the refugees, the initial resistance to allow them in, and then maybe, if we do let some in, maybe we should just let in the good ones, the ones that can help us. Because, after all, they are, savages. The problem is that the human migration crisis that we are currently seeing is going to just get worse and even more exacerbated by climate change. Climate change is causing resource scarcity, extreme weather events, and increased disease outbreaks. Events that people from other countries who are trying to support their family where they live are not able to anymore. They're the ones suffering the consequences of climate change, when it is nations like ours that are the cause. Yet, we resist to help them. But then on a more positive note, I think the third act carries with it an important message, namely that there will be cold, there will be wars, floods and earthquakes, but we need to keep going. We have been and will continue to experience the effects of climate change, but we have to keep going. We have to keep trying to help the planet and each other because, to quote the script again, too many people have suffered and died in order to make my children rich, for us to start reneging now. Too many people have suffered from climate change, and too many species have gone extinct for us to stop trying. We have a responsibility to act now and to change that narrative.
Thank you, Dr. Brisky.
Amen. Yeah.
Now, Dr. von Schlichten. Wilder's play raises one of the toughest topics in religion and probably in life, the problem of evil. Often, the ugly side of human nature seems to be depicted in the Antrobus's son Henry, originally named Cain, like the biblical murderer. And in each act of the play, the family seems to have a chance to reject him or get rid of him, such as in Act 2, when the family boards the boat to escape the biblical flood, and Henry Cain is allowed to come along. Why do they save him? To a lesser extent, we might also ask, why save a symbol of temptation like Sabina? Dr. von Schlichten, could you explain some of the play's biblical references for us and talk about the significance of saving this symbol of hate and violence, Henry, when the family of man has a chance to escape all that and start again?
Sure, absolutely, Carolyn. the play does a really fascinating job of incorporating different kind of religious concepts or biblical concepts, including the cyclical nature of the play, which reflects the biblical understanding of time, which is generally not linear but cyclical. But also, of course, there's a clear kind of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel reference, naturally, a little bit of Moses, certainly the flood narrative. And the title itself, The Skin of Our Teeth, comes from the book of Job, chapter 19, verse 20, where Job is experiencing all kinds of suffering that he doesn't understand, and he's trying to make sense of it and sort of wants to put God on trial, and is talking about how he's experiencing all this suffering and is basically making it by the skin of his teeth. And so the play, in a sense, deals a little bit with what we in religion call theodicy, which is, if there's this good, loving, powerful God, why is there all this suffering and misery? But you can also think about it in a more secular sense, and just thinking about why is it that human beings repeatedly do the very things that oftentimes are self-sabotaging, right? You see both in the play, where people are trying to make things better and they're undermining themselves, like repeatedly reaching out to Henry and Sabina. And I think part of what's going on there is maybe a couple of things. One is there's this pattern, which is also reminiscent of what we see in Scripture, and that is sort of human wrongdoing, what the Bible would call sin, human wrongdoing, which results in disaster, and then there's usually a remnant left over and some attempt at recovery. And that pattern happens over and over. And in that pattern, people often try to do better, but then often still gravitate towards evil and destruction, sort of in spite of ourselves. And I think part of that is we do that with our families sometimes, because you have a family in the midst of this, and the family repeatedly sort of reaches out and kind of tries to hold the family together, even if sometimes that's not always constructive. But I think it's also maybe part of what's going on here is that Wilder might be saying that part of this cycle of sort of falling and destruction and then remnant and recovery is that we human beings are never going to eradicate evil. It's always going to be there on some level, and we will sometimes unwittingly perpetuate it. I mean, Mr. Antrobus himself, at various points, is not a particularly noble figure. So there's a lot of that in the play. So that I think there's hope in the play in that there's a movement towards a gradual kind of improvement, but an also recognition that we humans are just going to repeatedly sort of reach out to this. In Judaism and Christianity, but they would talk about that in terms of sin, but we can also think in sort of broader terms of human fallibility and our just undermining ourselves in various ways. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Thank you, Dr. von Schlichten.
Sure, my pleasure.
In Act 2, on the boardwalk of the Jersey Shore, many characters embrace the mantra, "Enjoy yourselves," in a strange, carnivalesque, hedonistic party. Humans seem to be celebrating and indulging in excess in their lifestyles, with a disregard for each other and the earth. Everything is disposable, both people and resources, and all is blown about like litter in the coming storm. Meanwhile, the Convention of Mammals is supposed to be having a meeting and speaking to the other orders who have fins and feathers. Dr. Hoover, how would you respond to these events of the play, and what message do you think it offers to Americans today?
Well, I thought it was interesting when I was first reading this, because one of the first things that kind of stuck out to me about this time period, or the Act 2, was thinking about kind of the Industrial Revolution and how they said at the beginning, I think in my Act 1, it was all work, 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 and now it's enjoy yourself. And I'm kind of wondering if that is kind of, we're seeing this as a pattern, like Dr. von Schlichten mentioned. You can see this in technology, you can see this in science, where we work, 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 we get to the pinnacle, the amazingness of something, and then we kind of crash and burn. And then we work, 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 work to something else, and then we crash and burn. And it's just this cyclical pattern. It's not technically accurate, but as scientists, we would sometimes say, kind of getting into that pattern, the self-sabotaging, what have you, is is kind of entropy rearing its head. So a lot of times people say entropy means chaos. I'm not going to argue the mathematics of that. You can talk to Dr. Diane Miller if you want. But it's the world tends towards chaos, and that's really evident in this play. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how it's like the sheer hubris of people to think we are the best we've ever been right now. Because what was it, 1920s or so, when Albert Einstein was in the patent office, more or less. I'm not a date person. They decided that they could just shut down the patent office because everything that would be invented had been already. That was 100 years ago, right? So it's that, like, I noticed that in, especially that Act 2, it's kind of the hubris of, well, I can do whatever I want, let's enjoy ourselves, I know there's a boat waiting for me. It's kind of how I picked it up, okay? So the other thing from the sciencey point of view is acting as if everything's disposable, right? Kind of the expected, you know, let's talk about plastics, single-use plastics and everything. And I think that's what I would like people to understand, is that we are making truly, I hope not permanent effects on the planet with our rush for technology. So if you've ever heard of CFCs, what caused the ozone layer, they used to be in aerosol cans. We've made these chemicals because they have certain properties we want that are not found in nature. And now we're realizing they don't break down, they don't poof out of existence. So what you can do now is going to echo through future, right? So it's kind of thinking about that cyclical thing, where it didn't seem to matter to the people in Act 2 what was happening. I think even Sabina, which I was saying that in my head wrong the entire time I was reading it, she actually, I think, was talking about how other people don't have feelings, other people don't matter. It was a very narcissistic or like psychopath kind of vibe. And I think we just see that in display. You know, just me, I. What I want to do matters, my opinion matters, and nothing else. And, you know, we need to be careful because we're standing there like cyclical time. I was thinking the countdown to midnight clock with a nuclear holocaust, basically. You know, we're just like tap dancing on the edge of that minute hand thinking nothing's going to happen to us. So that sounded really pleasant.
Thank you, Dr. Hoover. Reduce, reuse, recycle. It's real. It's real. Now, in Act 3 of Skin of Our Teeth, as the characters emerge from the destruction and fires of warfare, there is no guarantee that it will not happen again. Wilder, like many of his contemporaries, had survived World War I, the war to end all wars, only to fight in another, greater, more widespread World War II. Professor Francoeur, can you talk a little about your research into the topic of the experience or threat of war and how it informed your work with the script and the actors?
Yeah, sure thing. So when I started reading Act 2, whenever I work on a play, I always ask myself, well, why are we doing this here? Why are we doing this now? So I try to find a way in that has to do with now. And the first thing that came to me was that scene with Henry and Mr. Antrobus, where they're having a pretty big argument. And it reminds me so much of families who have Trump supporters and anti-Trump people. And how during this last era, we've seen this rift in families that is tearing them apart over these beliefs. And it was like that this scene was written now. And I feel like that's the sort of war that I identify with that's happening right now. It's this war, it's this version of a civil war in our country. It's this war of ideas and beliefs that's going right into the family. Another thing that calls to mind for me is the women in Afghanistan right now. There are parts in Act 3 where Mrs. Antrobus and Gladys are emerging from like this hole in the ground, and they're scared. They're like, I heard something, what is this? And I instantly think of like the people who are traumatized the most by war are those who are marginalized. Women, marginalized groups, and they just like climate change, the people who are affected by this sort of violence are the people who don't have as much. So that's another thing I was thinking of. Also, that the act takes place after a war. It's like the coming out of war, and that makes me think of the pandemic and how the coming out of the pandemic has not been like the way we'd have all liked it to be. It's not clean cut. It's messy. It's slow. It stops and starts. And I feel like that's what happens too when we change after a war and transition into something else. So. Working with the actors on characterizations and certain choices to sort of illuminate that, and also you will see some of these ideas reflected in the costume design as well.
Awesome, thank you, Professor Francoeur. In addition to the war in Act 3, the actor characters also experience the catastrophe of food poisoning, and the play comes to a standstill as they must quickly rethink how to continue performing the play under new and unexpected circumstances. This seems like a striking parallel to the devastation COVID caused in the entertainment industry, which had to rethink how to make performances and bring them to an audience during a pandemic. Could you tell us something about your own experience as an artist and a New Yorker surviving this pandemic?
Yeah, so I was directing a show that had just gone up a week before when the city shut down. And that was a pretty intense experience. Being in New York, theater is truly the heartbeat of the city. So for the mayor to be like, all shows, Broadway, everything is closed in 1 hour, made me go, oh, something's really wrong. Like, there is something wrong. I don't think even in the flu of 1918, the theaters were closed for a very small amount of time. Then they were like, just open the doors, let's see what happens. So this was a big event. But I think just like they have to pivot in the show, so actors get food poisoning, we bring the crew on stage instead. That's exactly what we had to do by going to Zoom performances, and it happened at this university as well. So I actually think that moment in the play is not quite as palpable today because, I mean, not just theater, every single vocation has had to pivot in some way. So everybody is kind of used to that. But I think there's one good thing, maybe, that comes out of the isolation we had with the pandemic, and it's that we understand the value of live performance. I mean, theater, people are like, theater, whatever, I have TV. But it's not the same. To be in a room, in a space with other human beings and having an experience together that is elevating us, we need that. And I think we all know that now. It's not just enough to be on a computer or staring at a screen. We need that. So that might have been a little bit of a philosophical tangent, but I'm hoping that the country takes that lesson to heart and remembers it. Yeah.
People are sick of just sitting at home watching TV now. They want to go out and do things with people, so it's a good thing for the theater. So thank you again, Professor Francoeur, Dr. Hoover, Dr. Van Schlichten, and Dr. Brisky for sharing your insights today. And thank you all for helping us celebrate the return of live theater to Seton Hill. Cast, crew, and audience together again at last with this play of survival and hope. Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth.